Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another card making video. So today we can share the newest issue of Creative Stamping. This is issue 93 and the big A4 stamp set you can see here. This is called Mindful Moments and this is in support of Mental Health UK, and this is a really beautiful stamp set. Got some really great sentiments in here and some really big focal stamps. We've also got a free paper pack as well, you can see here. So I believe there's actually 3 sheets of each colour in here. And I think these are so beautiful. They're sort of watermarked. There's something really interesting, but it will make really great subtle backgrounds. So as always, let's take a look through our magazine itself. So like I said, this is issue 93. So we've had a little bit of issue with some of the magazines that I subscribe to, but the Creative Stamping seems to be okay, relatively speaking. So looking through the magazines, you can see all the normal inspiration in here, using the stamps and also then mixing those with that paper pack like you can see here. I think that the papers are really beautiful. Like I said, they're really subtle, but they've got some nice colours in there. There's also some really great project ideas in here as well, so it's not just cards that you can create. So looking at the next issue of Creative Stamping, this is Garden Gnomes, and I know the perfect person that I'm going to be creating a gnome card for their birthday. So I'm actually really excited to get this, and it looks like you get a paper pack in here as well. So that is a quick look at the magazine itself. So now we can get started actually creating some cards using this stamp set. And I'm going to be creating 2 cards today. They're going to be quite simple and quite basic to do, but actually how they end up looking, I think it's perfect because this stamp set is supporting that Mental Health UK charity, which is really important at the moment. You will be able to create some really fabulous cards with these stamps, and you don't always want them to be super busy and to be kind of super involved. These are going to be some really easy cards that you can create quite quickly. So I'm using some watercolor cardstock here, and this is A2 in size, and you see me hold up the stamps to this size card and you can see just how big they are. And you can also see, just looking to the left, all of that detail that is included within these images. So there's so much going on here, and there's so many different techniques that you could use to add colour to these images. You could just colour it in as normal, maybe with your pencils or alcohol markers, and not really worry too much about the actual design detail, but just colour it in normally. Or you could do a bit of ink smushing, that would look really nice. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to stamp these images, then heat emboss them, and then I'm going to use my Nuvo Shimmer powder to add colour to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these both into my stamping platform. So I'm using this today for 2 reasons. One, because it means I can stamp both of them at the same time and just save myself a little bit of time here. And also because I'm stamping onto the watercolor cardstock, I want to make sure that I get a really great impression, because like I said, I want to heat emboss these, so I need to make sure that I get all of that detail stamped. I do end up stamping probably 3 or 4 times using my emboss clear ink, and then I just hold it up to the light just to make sure that I've got all of the areas covered. But again, because it's a watercolor cardstock, it's textured, so not every little section is going to be picked up the first time. So using a stamping platform just means that you can restamp these and, like I said, get a really good coverage for when you come to add the embossing powder. So when I'm happy with my stamping, I'm going to go ahead and pour on my embossing powder. So because I'm making 2 cards here, I am doing a little bit of a production line, so kind of doing all the stamping together, then I'm going to pour on the embossing powder. Then when I've done both of those, I can go ahead and heat set this. It's just going to save a little bit of time. So for our elephant, I'm going to use some gold embossing powder because I thought this worked really nicely with the elephant image, rather than just kind of using white. So once I've got my image covered, I'm just catching all of the excess into a scrap piece of card, and I'm going to pop that back into the pot. So for the owl image, I'm going to use some black embossing powder. So I could have stamped this in black ink and then use some clear embossing powder. But the reason I used the clear with the black embossing powder is because I wanted to make sure that it stayed wetter for longer, so you could use a slower drying ink, but by using the sticky ink pad, because this is what it's designed to do, I felt like this was the best option to make sure that I got full coverage of the embossing powder, and to make sure that I create as many little wells and pockets for my Nuvo shimmer powder to sit in. Then next up, I'm going to heat set this with my heat tool. So I'm just starting with the elephant, and you can see part of that has already melted, and literally just how beautiful that looks in that light. It just shines really lovely. A couple of tips to help improve heat embossing is let your gun heat up for a minute or two before you start using it. That way then as soon as it hits that embossing powder, it's going to melt a lot quicker and not kind of blow any of the embossing powder away. If you find that your cardstock is starting to warp, then either move it around your cardstock more, or you can heat it from the front and the back, and that will help try and keep it as flat as possible. And if your cardstock is quite warped, when you've let it cool down and let that embossing powder harden back up again, you could lay it under something flat and heavy, or you could run it through your die cutter machine between two pieces of paper, and that will help flatten it out. So before I carry on, I have let this sit and just cool down completely, and now I'm going to get started using my Nuvo shimmer powder. So the one that I've picked is this golden sparkler, and I've brought out the little swatch that I created just to kind of make sure this was the colour that I wanted to use. And I think these browns and golds and different sort of colours that make up this particular shimmer powder is going to look really lovely against that black, and then using it for that owl image. So you can see that I've just sprinkled some of that shimmer powder over my image, and then I've spritzed it just with some clean water. So what I'm going to be doing is actually fussy cutting these out. So this isn't going to be my actual card. What I'm doing is just essentially colouring in my image here using the Nuvo shimmer powders. And then, like I said, I'm going to be cutting around this. So I'm not too worried about what the rest of the card looks like. I just want to make sure that I don't sort of mix those colours too much. I want the separate colours to sit within the little wells that the heat embossing has created. You can see I'm just holding the cardstock down with my pokey tool, and I was moving a little bit of the liquid around there, only because I felt like I had some areas that were still white. So you can see that I'm just concentrating on this bit just around the bottom section of his face and the upper part of his body, but this section towards the bottom and hit the top of his head and his ears, because this kept the colour really lovely and separate, I wanted to leave these alone. I didn't want to play with them at all because I really liked how it looked. But you will get some sections where you get quite a lot of water pooling in those areas, and that's where you get that section you can see just sort of on the right hand side of his face. So what I'm going to do is just take a paper towel. If you've got sort of too much liquid around there, you can just mop that up with a little bit of paper towel. So I don't want to take all of it up where then I don't have any of the colour left, but I'm just going to take enough out just to help it dry back. So because we have heat set our embossing powder, I don't want to heat this up with my heat gun too much. I'm not going too close to it, and I'm trying to move around my image. But what I am going to do is leave this to one side and just let it dry a little bit more naturally. But I've given it that first kind of help along, so it doesn't take quite as long to dry back. So now I'm going to pop that to one side, and then I can get started on our elephant image. So with this one, I used that gold embossing powder, and I already kind of had it in my head that I wanted to use the Meteorite shower. But this is really where these swatches have come in handy, because I can really see how these are going to look when they're down on my paper. And I thought this would look really beautiful, like I said, with this gold embossing powder. So I'm doing the same thing again, just sprinkling that Nuvo shimmer powder in just really lightly. I don't need sort of too much here. And I'm just spritzing it again with my water. And this is by far my favourite colour, because look at all of those separate colours you can see around the outside. So you've got that top section of his left hand ear, and that's just got bigger pooling because that's where a lot more of the water has gone, and there's too much water then for that small kind of well that we've created using the heat embossing. But you can see again that I'm just using my heat gun, again, not getting too close. I'm sort of moving it around, and I'm trying to dry along that outer edge, outside of the image as well, because I know that I want to cut these out. I'm going to fussy cut around, so I want to make sure that that's dry as well. And again, then I'm just taking my paper towel just to mop up some of those bigger areas. Again, not taking too much of it because I don't want to lose all of that colour, but enough so that this will dry back quicker. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with my owl. I'm just going to put my heat gun over it just to help along the process. And then I'm going to pop this to one side and let this dry naturally. So while I leave these to one side, you can go ahead and get started with my card bases. So I did have just a spare piece of cardstock just lying around. So this is either a side fold-in or a top fold-in mini slimline card size. And this is going to fit perfectly for our owl. So if you didn't catch my last video talking about different slimline cards, you can check that one out. And I did show you the dimensions and how to create a mini slimline card. But I also wanted to use the free papers that came included, just to make an easy background. So what I'm going to do is take the pad, and I'm just trying to work out which colour is going to go best with my owl. One of the things that I do when I get paper packs come through that are held together by staples is I will just remove those staples, because I have found in the past that when you try to sort of rip these out, you lose a little bit of that paper. So I find it easier literally just to take this apart, and then you can trim these down, and then you've got all of these double-sided A4 sheets rather than it being in a little booklet. So I've just pulled out my large Crafter's Companion Guillotine. This will then give me the space to just trim this straight down the middle. And then what I'm going to do is trim down my background piece, which is going to be one of the blue pieces. I can use then my mini guillotine for this, and it just makes things a lot easier. So for this card, I'm cutting down my background to be 3 1/4 by 5 3/4. This is just going to give me a small border on my card. And again, it's just keeping it really nice and simple. And that blue is just going to be a really great background then for our owl stamped image. I'm just going to assemble my cards with some double-sided tape from my purple tape runner. So I'm just doing all the way around the outside and then a couple of strips in the middle, and then I can pop these backgrounds onto my cards. So for the second card, for the elephant, it of course needs to be just a little bit bigger. So I picked out a 5 by 5 inch card, and then I trimmed my background to be 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. And again, this is just going to give me a really nice border around the outside of my card. So now I've got my card bases and my backgrounds finished. I can pop those to one side, and we can look then at fussy cutting our stamped images. So I've left enough time to dry, but you can see there's still a few areas where you do have a little bit of water left. So I'm just going to apply a small amount of heat. I don't want to heat these back up again. So what I'm going to do is take a paper towel, and I'm just then going to remove those extra bits of water, because I do now want to fussy cut these images. So I want to make sure that they're really nice and dry. So I'm going to fussy cut these now. I'm going to leave a border. I'm not going to cut right up to the stamped edge. And so this would be kind of the same in distance if I was doing it, if this was just a white edge. But what I really love about this is because we've used those Nuvo shimmer powders, and because then it's sort of spilled outside of our image, you're not going to notice if it's not completely even, which I think is a great bonus. But also it adds a little bit of interest. You don't have this stark white border around your stamped image. I just think it looks really nice and kind of carries on those colours, and just gives it a little bit more of a blended look. I also really loved fussy cutting these because they were so easy to cut out. The shapes are really quite basic. The biggest issue was just trying to get my scissors around it, because it was a thicker watercolor cardstock, and because it has been wet and then dried again, it did take me in some areas just a little bit more of a go to kind of get my scissors through it, but it was so easy and it really didn't take very long at all to cut out. I really love how these look. I'm going to hold them up closer to the camera so you can really see all of that detail that's in with those shimmer powders, and you can see how almost each little section of the design is a different colour. Because we've used that embossing powder, it's created those little pockets for all of those different colours to sit. And I think especially that gold with the Meteorite shimmer powder, I think it just works so well together. And then I tried to coordinate the background with one of the colours that is within that shimmer powder. So you can see kind of how these are going to look. Like I said, these are quite basic. They didn't really take very long to make at all. So if you are looking to make and sell for charity, I think these kind of designs are going to be perfect. So I didn't want these just to kind of sit against the card. I wanted it to stand out a little bit, so I tried to just shape it a little bit in my hands, and then I'm going to pop these onto some foam pads just to give it some really basic dimension. So all these cards are going to have to them is this main image, then we're just going to have a sentiment, and then we're just going to do a little bit of embellishment at the end. So I really want all of that focus to be on all of that colour and that really beautiful design of the stamp. And then I'm just going to do the exact same again for the elephant. I'm going to pop these onto some foam pads, and it's just going to sit really nicely, creating that little bit of shadow behind it. I do think that this elephant really is my absolute favourite. I think it's perfect for this size card. So like I said, this is a 5 by 5 inch card. Absolutely gorgeous. So for our sentiments, I've picked, of course, 2 from this stamp set. I've heat embossed these with some white embossing powder onto some black cardstock because I thought that would help make it stand out really nicely. So I tried to pair them with the image that I thought would go best. So for our elephant, I picked the sentiment, "A beautiful day begins with a beautiful mindset." So I thought that was really nice to go with that one, and it was a little bit of a bigger sentiment as well, just to help fill up that card a little bit. And then I wanted to pick a smaller one because, of course, our owl card, this is a mini slimline. It isn't as big. So for this one, I picked "Your only limit is your mind." And again, I felt then, owls are supposed to be wise. So I thought this one talking about the mind would be really great. I think these are some really beautiful sentiments, and I think these would actually be really perfect for maybe just inspirational postcards or decorations, whether you give someone to pop on their wall, maybe in their office. I think it's going to be really great. So the last thing I'm going to do for these cards, again, just to finish it off a little bit, is I'm going to add some Nuvo drops to these. So I'm going to try and go a little bit basic. I don't want to go overboard too much. But of course, as I've said in previous videos, I still really need to practice where I'm placing my embellishments and things like that. I probably still need a little bit of work to try and get them in the right spots. So for the owl, I wanted to pick up some of those brown tones. So I went with the Nuvo vintage drops in the saddle bag. So this is really beautiful. I actually really like these because they dry to a matte finish when you let them dry completely. I think they look really beautiful. So you can see I've done 1 above, 2 below. I think they say to do them in odd numbers. I think I was happy with the 1 and the 2. Then I decided to add a 3rd one. Then I thought it looked a bit weird. So then I pulled out my clear drops. I feel like, again, like I said, I just really need to practice. If anyone can recommend any videos where they talk about that, just so I can sort of practice a little bit more, that would be really helpful. So leave me a comment down below. Definitely something I need to work on. And then for my elephant, again, I wanted to pick up some of those colours that's in the shimmer powder. So I went with the crystal drops in the duck egg blue. Again, I had the same issue. I did add some clear drops to this as well, but yeah, I still think I really need to work on my placement. But I still really love how these cards ended up, despite whether I like my embellishments or not. So those are my finished cards. So I really enjoyed creating these, and I actually really love how these have turned out. And I really like this stamp set, and I think it's great that they are supporting the charity Mental Health UK. I think, like I said, that's really important at the moment. And of course, it's nice to get a magazine through as well with everything going on. So just to remind you, this is using a free gift from Creative Stamping Magazine issue 93, and this was called Mindset Moments. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out when I post my next video. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.